Welcome back, guys. So I would like to, since we have the UV setup already, and we also have our UV setup, and I think we should be good to go. So the only thing we need to do now is we also have our project setup. Next thing we need to do is to come in here to the workspace and then change this to Xgen. So we won't be using the interactive room, using just the normal Xgen core for this. Also have some kind of template for the Xgen, more or less like a guide, so I don't kind of forget. So even if I forget, I have like a board for some of the settings I used, so I'll be able to keep track of everything. This is not it. So I think it should be, yes. I also have some reference also I need to bring in here, so let's just bring the reference in here. I think select these two. So that one do we need? Probably this also, and this. Seems to be selecting more than what I need. Anyways, let's just copy this. Come in here and paste this in here. So I already have some of the references set up in here. These are some older ones for some other projects. But it's always good to kind of have most of your Xgen references, at least the general references, in one place, and some certain settings also in one place, so you can easily keep track. Of them and kind of follow through with them also to kind of speed up the process. So the first thing we're going to do is to create an Xgen description and a collection also. So I need to kind of explain what a collection is and what a description is. Let me just push this aside for now. Okay. I think I need to kind of create more space for this. I don't want this in here, so I need to remove this. Or delete for this. I'll remove this also. I don't think I'll need this. Delete this. Okay. So I'll also need my outliner to be available in here. Need my outliner in here, so I'll come back in here to Windows and I'll click on outliner. I think I'll just dock the outliner in here. Just dock it around here. And I've collapsed it a bit more. So I don't think I'll be needing this anymore, so I can just easily close this. You can work with this. I already have the reference in here already. So I have the reference in here. Okay, but just before we get started with this, let's just kind of do some basic anatomy for the directionality of the hair. So if we were to look at the hair from the top view, we can kind of see, but it kind of varies for each individual though, but there's more or less like a spherical pattern that kind of originates from the top of the head and kind of flows in a particular direction around the head. So if we should look at this gives us a better idea as to the directionality of it. You can see how this frontal part around the direction kind of moves from that origin point all the way to the front like so. Then for this side, for this side, it kind of bends, kind of moving more like a downward wave pattern around this. So something similar also should be happening at the opposite side. So you can kind of see the directionality to it. So we're going to be using this as like our anatomical guide to kind of make sure the air is flowing in the accurate direction it should. This is another example also. Don't know if you guys can see it. You can see the flow of it. So you can see the origin point. You can see how this flows down. So we're going to be using this as a kind of good guide, to kind of follow a particular or accurate directionality to it. So that's just more or less like a ground foundation for what we need to do, regardless of which particular hair we're creating, whether for African, Asian, or Caucasian. So regardless, we're just going to try as much as possible to follow the directionality to it. That's another example to this also. You can see how it kind of bends, curves down. Directionality of it kind of follows the same direction also, like the anatomical reference we had just showed you guys. Let's look for another typical example to this. Yeah, this is for the back view. Now the origin point for this particular hair should be around here. It's more or less around here, more or less very close to the center of the head. Let's look for another example. Here we can see the origin point for this is also around here. So if we can kind of pinpoint the origin point, we kind of know the directionality of it. The origin point for this is on the other side around here. You can see how it kind of maintains that anatomical flow or directionality to it. The origin point is also around here. You can see the directionality to it also. So keeping that in mind, that will be really helpful, even though we're kind of working with or creating an African hairstyle for this that may typically not look very obvious, especially when they have a lot of hair on top of that center part that are kind of supposed to reveal the origin point of the hair and kind of show us the directionality to it. So that being said, it's quite important, it's very important to kind of make sure you kind of understand the flow and directionality to it. If we should take another example at this, let me look for a clearer version, so something a bit more clearer that has a clearer direction to it. It is not very obvious. Yes, something is here. This should work. You can see how this particular one also has some level of directionality to it also. So keeping this in mind actually helps you do a better job to kind of know how the air flows, so you can kind of sculpt your Xgen guides to kind of follow that same directionality to it for a more realistic result. So regardless of where the hair is, there's always a direction to the flow of the hair strand, so whether for short hair or for long hair. So if you can try as much as possible to kind of maintain that directional flow to it, you should be having at least good or an appealing results right off the bat. But there's still a lot more going on in there, especially for the clumping and noise and some other things in between that kind of gives your give the hair a more realistic look to it. Same goes for the lighting and the shading also. But it's just more or less like a foundational level that you need to kind of understand and then keep in mind to kind of help you or kind of guide you on the hairstyle you're trying to recreate. So that being said, one thing I would like to do before moving on is to, I think, for the body, this high poly version, let's bring everything back in. So Control 1 to kind of reveal everything back again. So this high version, I'd like to kind of plug in the texture for it. So let me just drag this all the way up. Then I'll click on this checker pattern. Then I'll plug the texture in there. So I should just look for file. So I'm going to see the texture in there. So I'll click this file option and I'll just move back a few steps. Then XP textures, African male. This should be it. This should be it. This is definitely it. So I'll just plug that in there. Let me just do a quick save also. Then yeah, it should be on XRGB. That's completely fine. So to kind of visualize the texture in there, let's just click on this checker pattern around here for textured. So click on it. That should kind of reveal the texture we have in there. I don't know why it's disappearing out of sight. And this looks rather odd. This looks rather odd. Yes, it's better now. It feels more like a glitch. Oh yeah, okay, yeah. The reason why it's not showing properly is because of this head scarp we had in there. So I wasn't supposed to kind of paint out a region where the hair should be growing out from. So that would kind of be like a guide for me to kind of do this precisely, but I did not do that. But that's completely fine. That's completely fine. I'm just going to do more or less like an eye measurement of where it's supposed to be and kind of paint that properly. Let me turn off this symmetry for now. Alright, so that's fine. So let's go back to the hair scarp. So we want to kind of start with the head hair instead. So I want to select the head hair scalp. Let's come back in here. Let's go out of the isolation mode. I'm still on isolation mode. Let's go to isolation mode. I'm going to select all of this and hide that. Control H to hide that. And I'm supposed to be giving this a different. I thought I gave this a different color actually. Don't know why it's just taking. Let's do delete by type history on this. More or less select everything. Delete by type history. Okay. So let's apply a new material to this. So just a good normal regular Lambert should be fine. Okay. This should work just fine. I'm not supposed to give this. Let's give this a different material also. Lambert. I'm also going to name them just to keep things organized. Okay. So let's start with let's start with this. Let's rename this to head scalp. Alright, so this also should be, let me see if I can actually copy this and paste this in here. Okay, then this eye scalp, I'll copy this also and just paste this in here. I think I need to do delete by type history in here also. So I think we should be fine. We should be fine now. I would like to darken this material. So let me just isolate it again. Try to darken this material. It's a bit much easier to kind of see the guide in there when we darken the material. So let me just repeat the same process for the other ones. Okay, so we should be fine. So with this isolated now, what we are going to do now is to, with this selected, we go to Xgen. So we're going to click on create new description. So let's look at this description setting in here. Let me just put this in here. So this description, so I'm not going to use like, a better idea to use for this would be like folder and kind of like a subfolder. So this description, you want to kind of see this description. Let me start from the collection. You want to kind of see this collection as your main folder. Then this description now is now like the content under that folder. So a collection can be like a folder that comprises of different content inside. It can be in form of MP3, video, text, and whatever format you want it to be. But in this case, this description will just be like the only content that should be under this collection, which we kind of interpreting this collection as a single folder that can hold, or more or less like a group. It can also be a group folder. Using an idea of a group folder having layers underneath it. So this will be like our group folder. Then this description will be like the layers underneath or inside the group. So just interpret this collection as your group folder, then interpret this description as the layers underneath that folder. So now, that being said, we can rename this collection as the head hair, because we're going to be having different description under this collection. So it's kind of a general rule of thumb, kind of name this with a more generalized name that is better fitted for whatsoever stuff in relation to the name you're going to be adding underneath this folder. So in real sense, it should be more or less like, since we have this hair scalp in here, so this should be like our head. Should probably use caps for this. So this would be like head scalp. You can't use space in here, so let's just use underscore. Head scalp underscore. You can use COLL to, that can be interpreted to collection. So now for this description, so it just boils down to how many layers of hair, of separated layers of hair do you want to have in this collection. So if I should more or less like break it down to something a bit more simplified, so you guys can get a better idea of what I'm trying to do, or more or less my thought process before making any further adjustments to the name in here. So that's basically like, okay, if I should, let's use a more typical example. This is a more typical example. We can use this as a more typical example. So if we were to use more or less like this as a typical example, that is the beard. Or it's better still, something even a bit more simplified. Something a bit more simplified. So we can classify this into two. the eyebrow on the hairs on the eyebrow, this eyebrow, then the eyelashes. So more or less, if I'm to create the eyebrow and the eyelashes, one description should be specific for only the eyebrow, then another description should be specific for only the eyelashes. I'm sure you guys get the idea. Same here also, we have the mustache. We have the mustache and then we have the beard. So depending on how you want to kind of separate this out, it's more or less more ideal to kind of have them separated out into different descriptions, so you can kind of focus specifically on getting that particular aspect as accurately as you can without it affecting other descriptions or other aspects of the hair parts in your model or on the character you're working on, or on the model you're working on, whichever one you prefer to use. So it's more or less like having a collection of this. If for example I'm creating the hairs for the eyebrow and for the eyelashes, that means generally this collection should be named eye scalp collection. Then the first description would be eyelashes description. The second description should be eyebrow description. So in that collection of eye scalp, I would have two descriptions, one for the eyelashes and one for the eyebrow. So if that makes sense. But now, creating this particular hair for this character, ideally I would like to break this into two parts. One would be for the main part of the head, which is more or less like, let me look for a better reference that will kind of a better angle, a better view to it. So it should be more, let's think, I don't think I can draw in here. There's no way to actually draw inside PureRef. So I'm just going to do this instead. I would come in here and I'll just create a new screenshot for this. So I'll just grab this. I'll grab this screenshot for this. So typically, let me just put this around here. So typically, I'll prefer to have more control over this, because the more you can have them separated up into individual layers or into individual descriptions, the better control or the greater control you have over it. So it's more ideal for me to kind of get them separated out as an individual piece, to kind of work on them specifically and have more control over it. So ideally, I would like to break this into two. So the first should be around here. Why is it not painting? Yes, painting now. That was kind of slow. So the first description, I believe, I'd like to have would be just the hair on this center part that goes all the way at the back. Then the second description should be, let me use a red brush instead. Second description should be this hairs all the way here. Now the reason why I'm doing this is because the hairs here are a bit more scanty compared to the hairs in the center here. So I'll kind of have this like description 1, then this would be our description 2. So I'm going to break this down into two, like so. So that's basically my thought process for this, to have a bit more of a greater control over this. So with that being said, let's now go into some more specific settings for this. So let me just scroll out of this like so and go back in here. So for the most part, either creating long hair or short hair, this is more or less like the precise settings you will be using for this. So let's see. Yes, so create collection. Yes, in this collection I'm going to name this to, let's see, center. I'm just name this to center underscore hair underscore DES, so description, DESC, let's use DESC. So it will be like for the center part of the hair. But I'm supposed to name this to send. Let me name center head underscore hair underscore DESC. So center head hair description. Then once kind of use this, should be on spline. Splines are mostly used for long hair, vines, etc. But they're very good for both long and short hair. So I'm going to be keeping this as it is. Then randomize across surface. I'm only using the specific setting that I'll be using for most of your projects, except probably you want to do something slightly different that probably you might need to try some of this. But for the most part, at least for most of what I've been using, or for the most part that I've been using Xgen, you want to be using the spline for both long and short hair. Even for the beard also, you should work just fine. You're free to make your research in regards to the other options also in here. But for now, let's just work with this. So then random across surface should be turned on, because we want to have our hair generated randomly across the surface, because naturally human hair is kind of springing up, or is being sprung up from different locations of the parts where the hair is growing out from. So there's no specific pattern or cube-like formation of how the hair grows on the human body. So it's more or less more randomized. So let's keep this as random across surface. Then another option should be placing and shaping guides. So the reason why I'm going to be using this placing and shaping guides, as the name implies, we want to kind of place the guide by ourselves. And we also want to have control over shaping the guide the way we want it to be. So we can have our hair following that same directionality to it, or kind of springing up with the same directionality to it. So we want to kind of keep this placing and shaping guides just the way it is around here. So everything should be fine. Everything should be just fine now. Then we can go to creating the guide. So let's click on create. So typically in here, I'm just going to be focusing majorly on the tools that I'm going to be using for this particular aspect of the tutorial. So it's just going to be counterproductive, I believe, for me to go through the entire tool in Xgen, because at the end of the day, I won't be using all the tools. So I'm just going to be using tools that are very specific for this particular project we're working on. So one thing I would like to do is kind of move this devil of a tool away. Kind of put this somewhere far away, so I won't be able to kind of click on it and use it anytime soon. So what that basically does is to convert your egg guides into actual objects, which is going to kind of slow down your PC. So I'm going to click on the middle mouse scroll and just drag this, probably just drag this where I won't be touching it way too much. Let me just plug this in here like so. So that should be fine. So that should be completely fine for this. So yeah, yes, that's fine. So now let me just move this to the side. You notice that something is being created in here now. We have our collection, which is this hair scalp collection. And on the description, we have just one single description in here, which is the center head hair description. And that is more or less like precisely what we want. Keeping in mind that this particular scalp, or the scalp, has to be selected. Very important. You always want to select the scalp you are creating that collection or description on, before creating the hair or description in there. So right off the bat, you notice that there's absolutely nothing happening in here. There's absolutely nothing happening in here. So the reason being is because we can't generate hair from nothing. We have to kind of create guides that will kind of help the hair follow the same directionality to it. So let's just do a quick example in here. So if I should just kind of do a brief a brief introduction to some of these settings in here. Or better still, let's just work with this. Then whatever setting we find ourselves in, I'm just going to take my time to explain that so you guys can kind of get the general idea as to how to use them. This is by no means an introduction to Xgen. I want to believe you've kind of gone through some basic steps to kind of understand what Xgen is, and probably play with it in some other ways or in some other projects to kind of understand how to at least get a groundwork usage of this. So carrying on. So let me kind of create a guide. So how do we create a guide in here? You can, some of the settings you have in here, you also find some of them around here too. We have our primitive, preview output, modify, grooming, utilities. Now I can't really find my utilities in here because there's something I need to do at the background. Kind of make this utility show. But it's supposed to have something in here. Probably in the next lesson I'm just going to fix that at the background, and then this should be showing up correctly. So for now, in this primitive in here, we have the generator seed. This is more or less kind of randomize the air growth around the surface. Then the density kind of controls. I turn this on, nothing is happening in here because no preview visible. Description set to use guides, but no guides has been created. So nothing will be generated because we have not really created any guide in here. And just do a quick save for this. Keep in mind you might be having crashes with Xgen. That's completely normal if I should say, which is not supposed to be, because it's completely normal if you have crashes in here. What's very important is that you make sure you have your project set up already, like we did initially. So this density kind of creates the number of hairs you want generated on the surface of your scalp. So that's for that. Then in here this is what we're going to be using to kind of generate, to kind of paint where we want our hairs to grow on. It's more or less like a maxing feature in here that we don't kind of specify some painted region of where we want the hair to grow and where we don't want the hair to grow out from. Okay. So modify CV count kind of specific. It's more or less like let's just see this as our resolution settings. This is more or less like create, or more or less like specify how detailed you want the hairs to kind of be generated using the guide. So if I choose a simpler or a more familiar term, it's more or less like your subdivision level. So the higher subdivision level you have, the more you can add more sculpted details to your model. So in other words, the more number you have in here defines how refined you want your hairs to kind of follow the guide properly. Don't worry, I'm going to show you guys an example of this. I'm not kind of explaining like general terms to it. Then we have the length. It's kind of in simple term how long the hair should be. Though this is kind of extend the hair longer than the height of your guide. Same also with the width, how wide you want it to be. Then we have the width ramp and we have taper. Most of these, we're not basically going to be using all of these though. There are just a few we're going to be using. Hopefully, while working on this, we should kind of touch up on some of these tools or some of the important tools we'll be using on here. So let's start by creating a guide. So there's something else I also need to turn on. I also have like a file whereby yeah, this is it. I have some settings in here I'm going to be using for my Xgen guide. So this is it. So back to Xgen in here. Okay, so let's create a guide for this. Let's create a guide for this. So to create guides, we need to just come in here and click on this plus icon. So this is called, no, not select objects. Let me select objects. Though our object does not necessarily need to be selected though, because we already selected this and then created a description to it. So everything happening in this description, so all the tools in this menu in here right now will be affecting only the scalp that the description is being applied to, which is this head, hair, scalp. So whether you select it or not, it's still going to work. But just to be on the safe side, let me select this. So let's kind of figure out our origin points and bring back this reference in here. So let's kind of figure out where our origin point should be. So let's kind of visualize this from the back. Probably turn off this grid for now. So visualizing this from the back, let's just assume our origin points is more or less around somewhere like here. So clicking on this, I'll just come in here and tap in here. So once I tap in there, just give this a moment, a guide should appear. So we have something in there now. So we have this guide in here now. So this should be more or less fine for what we need it for, at least the height. So if you go to our selection tool, this mark you selection tool, and kind of select this, you can actually select that. Once you select this now, we can actually move it out of the particular place we placed it on. But we can definitely scale it. We can scale this, and we can also rotate this however we want. So with this being created, let's just go back to our main reference for this. So now, keeping in mind how high you want the hair should be. So I'm just gonna figure out how high this should be. You can probably leave this like this though it's kind of a bit higher than what we have in here in the reference, but I think this will work just fine. This will work just fine. So if we kind of option click on this, let's kind of visualize the control point for this. So this has 3 control points in here. There are 3 control points in here. If we want to kind of increase the control points in there, we can come here to rebuild. So I think this has 5, 1, 2, 3, 4. I think there should be one under. So if we come in here, kind of put this to around 10 and click OK. I don't think this is selected. Let's come to this sculpt tool. Select this sculpt tool. I don't think if that is, I want to be sure. So on the sculpt, on the selection mask, select map U2. So I'm going to select. Let me go to objects. Select select this. You come to rebuild. Let's put this at 10 and I'll click OK. Let's confirm if that is showing. Yes, it's showing now. It's showing now. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There's one more underneath this. Let's see if we can. Yes, 10. So it's kind of this kind of helps you. If I should come in here and select these points now and go to the move tool, I can actually move that. So you can kind of have more control over this. But the idea is to kind of make this a bit fewer. So depending on what you're creating though, makes it a bit fewer so you can have more, or yes, you can have greater control over this. So go back to objects, select this, rebuild. I think 5 should be fine. I'll click OK on this. Control guide point. So we have this at 5 now. We can also use the sculpt tool. If you increase the sculpt tool, I'll just hold down B. I think so. If you should hold down Control and B, and I think right mouse click and drag, you can actually adjust the size of this. Yes, sorry, left mouse click rather, hold Control and B, and then you left mouse click. You should be able to control the size of this, and more or less like control the depth or the movement of this. So the more points you have on this, the more control you have to kind of make this flow more precisely as much as you want it to. So now I've created a guide in here. If you should come in here and kind of click on, now when we have update preview automatically, click on this now. You ought to be having some guides they're generated now on top of this. Can't seem to have any guide. Let's see what we're missing. Under this preview, let's turn off only primitive in view, because we don't want to generate air only on the camera, based on the camera angle. Put this back to 0. Can't seem to have any air generated in here, so let's just create another guide somewhere around here. Then oh yes, made a mistake. I was supposed to go out of isolation. So they were actually being generated, but I was on isolation mode. So let's just clean up this scene a bit more. Let's hide this and hide the main body also. Ctrl H to hide that. So now we have some airs being generated in there now. So let's turn this off. So if I should come in here and then let's do something like this. Just kind of explain something a bit. When I just move this direction all the way this way, so that they're more or less facing opposite sides. Select this also, come to the sculpt tool and push this way. Then we'll kind of let's generate some airs for this also. You can see how from the top view they are both following separate. They're trying as much as possible to kind of interpolate in between the directionality of these two air guide. You can see how this one at the edge is kind of following it more accurately. One at the other edge also following it more accurately. But the ones at the center, so it's more or less trying to interpolate in between them and kind of figure out where the direction should be. More or less like averaging out the directionality of it. So if I should take this down, let's just take this down something a bit fewer. You can see how the airs now are being generated. So keeping that in mind. So before we stop this video for now, let's just kind of do one more thing. I want to kind of get the length of the air accurately before I kind of move on. So basically for this, the width should just be this value 0.01 should be fine. So I'll just drag this down to the width. So 0.01. 0.01. I'll hit OK on this. Then another thing to change. For the most part, this should work just fine for most of everything. So on the taper 0.71, so I'll just copy this 0.71. On the taper, I'll just paste this in here. If you're using these settings, you should be good to go both for long and short hair. I'll be using these settings from a particular professional that I watched this tutorial from, Michael Push, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. So I'll copy this also. Taper starts. So this taper starts, I'll just paste this on here. I don't know if I can, let me see if I can zoom into one particular strand and kind of show you guys. So yes, this is a bit, let me just close this for now. So you can see how it kind of tapers at the starting point. No, not the starting points. At the end. This is more or less like the origin point. Where it's growing out from is like the origin points. So this will be like the roots and then the tip. You can see how it's tapering out at the tip. Then kind of fully a kind of tapered version of it all the way down to the roots. So this should be completely fine for. It should be completely fine for most of what you want to use it for. Yes. But since we're kind of creating an African hair to this, we want to kind of have the guides facing more or less an upward direction. Not completely up though, maybe something with a bit of an S shape to it. So let's just get something like this. Something like this should be fine. We want to kind of have, oh, now we have to do this. So that's why it's kind of important, kind of check this from all direction, because this is like a 3D view. So you want to kind of check this from all directions to be sure if it's working correctly. So let me show you guys another trick. So if you want to kind of copy this direction of this and kind of paste this on here, what I need to do is kind of select this, right click on hold and use copy guide shape. Copy guide shape. I'll select this guide, right click, get a closer view on it, right click on hold and I'll use paste guide shape. You can see that kind of pasted that shape in there. So now if I click on this generate again, you can see how the hairs are kind of, let me increase this a bit more. Let's increase the density of this a bit more. Something like so. You can see how this changes up a bit more. So this is basically what we're going to do. So now the idea now is to kind of create guides all over where the hair should go out from, but keeping in mind that you don't necessarily need to kind of fill up the entire head scalp with so many guides. That will just be harder to control. So the idea is kind of create fewer ones as a base. They can kind of use kind of capture the general directionality to it. Then when you're satisfied with that, then to kind of refine it a bit better, you can now begin to add extra guide in specific places to kind of have greater control over the directionality of some specific or individual regions. Keeping that in mind, it's more or less like when you're sculpting a character. So you want to kind of start with the primary forms, then you kind of move to secondary form, and then you move to tertiary form. So in the primary forms, you kind of want to have like a general block out of it. So you want to kind of keep the resolution quite low. So in this case, we want to kind of keep the guide quite low, so we have greater control over it, to kind of move or kind of have a control over the general directionality of the hair growth around the surface. Because if you have too many on this, too many just means you have to spend more time controlling each and every individual guide. So you want to kind of keep that in mind, so you have a ground level of what to do and a better thought process as to how to kind of generate your hair faster in a more efficient way or in a more efficient manner. So that will just be like so this will just be fine for so this is just more or less like a base or a foundational guide to kind of help you guys understand my thought process when kind of creating or working with the Xgen guide. So in the next lesson, we're going to start going in depth and start creating or adding more guides to this, and kind of keep working until we have our finished result. So I'll see you guys in the next lesson. Bye for now.